Hey, what's up you guys? It's Six. Really quickly before we get into this video, I just wanted to mention that I got a lot of requests to turn this Draculaura into prints, and so I did. It's going to be available in 4x6 and 5x7 as both matte and gloss finishes. I'll insert a picture of what those are going to look like, something like right here, and you can find those at the link down in the description or right on screen here if you want to go and grab one. Hey, what's up you guys? It's Six. Welcome back to my channel. So really quickly before we get into the video, I just want to talk a little bit about the illustration that you guys are seeing on screen. So it is actually a draw this in your style for the artist The Ugly Drama on Instagram. I'll insert their original right here. And I will of course be drawing that in my own style. I'm going to be doing kind of like this one layer-ish type painting style that I don't normally do. I used to do it way back when I used to use Paint Tool Sai, and I'm still working out how to emulate that same style on Procreate, so bear with me. She goes through quite the ugly phase, but I promise at the end everything comes together. So if that's something that you guys want to see, make sure to stick around for that. Also, one more thing I want to mention is that I am in a different room at the moment recording because I don't have a specific recording area at the moment, so I'm kind of having to bounce around between areas that are most convenient for me. So if you hear any echoes or the furnace kicking on, I'm sorry, it's snowing and I'm in like my dining room. Anyways, getting into the actual video. So I have been doing commissions for a few years now. In fact, they're open right now, so check out the links down in the description if that's something you're interested in. But if you're not interested in that and you're just here for the drama and maybe some tips and tricks on how you can start taking on and handling commissions, stick around and maybe subscribe for more art stuff in the future if you feel like it. So first I'm going to get us started with a story, which by the way, if somehow, some way you're the commissioner watching this video, no shade to you, man, I just didn't have a backbone and you were expecting a lot from an inexperienced artist for very little pay. So again, no shade, but maybe treat artists a little better. Anyway, this was by no means my first commission, but it was one of my first larger commissions, as in this person implied that they would be back several times, which they were, but we'll get into that in a bit. At this point in time, I wasn't receiving regular commissions. I might have gotten one or two every other month or so, so the idea that this person was implying that they would be a repeat customer already had me really excited, but on top of that, they were also fandom related, so I was really excited to be able to do something that was not only for work, but also would be really fun and allow me to express some of my own personal interests. I wish I could find our conversation, but for some reason I can't find our DMs on Instagram anywhere. That being said, if you do want to see a few of them, consider checking out my Q&A from I think already a year ago, but I will try to link it in the iCard if I remember. If I don't, it's right before my art style theft video. For some reason I was able to find it then, so a few screenshots in there. Anyway, since I can't find them now, I'll try to summarize as best as I possibly can. Also keep in mind at this point my commissions were incredibly underpriced because I priced them entirely based on what I felt like my skill set was, rather than how much time these commissions would actually take me. I'll also talk more about pricing shortly, but for context, since I was able to find the invoices for these commissions, none of them were over $25. So like I said, to begin this story, they reached out to me asking if I could do a commission based off of Avatar, as in the last Airbender, not the blue people, and I said of course because I love Avatar and that would be a super fun commission for me to take on. So funnily enough, this initial commission was mostly fine. There were a few tweaks that needed to be made, which is, again, absolutely fine. I also wasn't as experienced with commissions as I am now, so my skills were not as sharp, and looking back on it, this first commission was kind of rough, so this person being nitpicky was absolutely reasonable, if, again, a little nitpicky, but it wasn't enough for me to like totally dislike the idea of working with this person again. So when they reached back out to to me, I was super excited that they liked the first one enough to come back and commission me a second time. But this round of commissions is where the problems started. So they couldn't decide on a subject matter and kept bouncing back and forth between Spider-Man, a Jedi, and a vampire. And here's the thing about commissioning me, I am more than happy to bounce ideas around with you. I will absolutely help you find references or throw up ideas or suggestions to help you nail down a pose idea or a subject matter. It's something that's super fun for me, is the whole planning process. What threw me off, however, was when they started mentioning that they might want to be aged up a bit if they were going to either do the Jedi or the vampire. Not at all an odd request, it fits the subject matter, so why not? Now, why was this a bad thing, you might be asking? Well, that in itself was fine, but they started saying stuff like they didn't know how old they wanted to be, so I gave them some age ranges to kind of help them picture it. But then they said they wouldn't be able to picture it unless I could do some sketches for them for free, or else they absolutely wouldn't be able to move forward or decide on their subject matter. And since I didn't want to miss out on the chance of a commission, I decided to do it anyway, even though I vaguely remember telling them that I wasn't comfortable with the idea of sketching for free. I think they just kept implying that they wouldn't be able to make a decision without me doing so I ultimately ended up doing it. Once I did so, they decided on, I think, somewhere around 30s to 40s range and wound up doing a Jedi. They sent me reference for the pose that they wanted done, and I got it all sketched up, and they approved the sketch. We're happy with it even. So in my commission process, that is when I go over and do the line art. So I do the line art, and all of a sudden, they want an entirely different pose after I already cleaned up and rendered the first one. But I changed it anyway. Total new sketch, new line work, and they approved it, rendered it, and now they don't like it again. And instead want to look younger, as in their current age. And I think they even said something snarky about like the expression. I don't know. It's really weird. But I did it, and that then of course made those free sketches that I did absolutely useless and unnecessary. And at this point, I finally told him that if he wants me to make any other changes, since I did those first free sketches and an entirely different pose, that if he wanted me to alter it again, I'd need to charge a fee for major revisions. And all of a sudden, there were no more major revisions. I finally render everything and it gets approved and completed. So this commission kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, but I still went ahead and let them commission me a third time, which now I'm thinking I might not have even been paid for, because it's not listed among the other commissions that I did for them. All of the other ones are there, but not that one, so that sucks. But regardless, I did a logo of some sort for them, and they never reached out for another commission again, which I honestly was kind of grateful for, because by this point they had squeezed so much free work out of me, and at the time I knew if they reached out to me again, I still wouldn't have said no, despite the discomfort and amount of work I would have ended up doing, because I ultimately needed the money. So was that all the commissioner's fault? Absolutely not. I was still really inexperienced, and I was undercharging. I didn't know what boundaries to set when it came to making changes or alterations to my work. So because of that fiasco, all of that drama, I am here to give you some tips to get started taking commissions so you don't make the same mistakes that I did. So getting into that, tip number 1 is to price your work accordingly. I know if you're insecure about your art style or your skills that it can be tempting to charge $20 for a full body commission. I know it might feel really weird asking for anything higher than what you feel like your art is worth, but you also have to take into account how much time these commissions will take you. If a full body takes you 6 hours and you charge $20, that's not even $4 an hour. It's barely over half of minimum wage. 6 hours is also almost an entire work day. Imagine getting paid $3 a day at any other job. You wouldn't save, you wouldn't survive, and you'd probably quit. You probably wouldn't work there anymore. So let's say that you're a beginner artist, and again, a full body takes you about 6 hours. Well, ideally, you'd want to pay yourself at least minimum wage, but I would recommend more. But for today's video's sake, we'll say minimum wage. That would mean that for 6 hours of work, you should receive $45. But like I said, maybe you're a beginner and you're not comfortable with that because you don't feel okay enough charging for work that you're not ecstatic about. Well, try to gauge what's most comfortable for you personally, but try not to go below half of what that price ends up being. So for example, 45, about half would be 22-ish, so try not to go below that. Another thing you need to take into account is materials. Are you working digitally or traditionally? If you're working digitally, unless you pay your internet and electric bill, you might not have to worry as much, but if you're working traditionally, try to gauge how much of your materials you end up using on a piece, and then try to sort out how much those materials would cost and factor that into your overall price. Number 2 tip, now that you've got your pricing out of the way, how do you get paid? So there's a lot of different options out there for artists to receive payment for their commissions. Here are some of the few that I have personally had experience with. So the first is PayPal, and always try to use PayPal through its invoice feature and avoid using friends and family. I know that fees are annoying, but if you're paid through friends and family and then they try to file a dispute and they find out you were selling goods and services without being taxed or fees, you can get your account terminated because selling goods through friends and family is against their terms of service. Friends and family is also just a really common way that you can get scammed through PayPal. I've never had this happen to me personally, but I've definitely seen in art groups people who have. Next up, we have Cash App and Venmo, and I'm putting these in the same category because they're basically the same thing, just run by two different companies. They're both great because the transaction is quick and easy and there's no fees like you see with PayPal. Venmo also, I think, is run by PayPal, so I'm not sure why Venmo doesn't have any fees. Anyway, I've never experienced or heard of anyone running into trouble using these two apps, for example, scams or anything like that, so to my knowledge, they're generally pretty safe. Another great option is through Ko-fi or Ko-fi. It's really common for artists to do doodles and stuff for tips on there. I myself do this, but if you want to take on more beefy commissions, I'm sure Ko-fi can do that. Back when I first made mine, it was kind of just a tipping feature, but I see that they also have implemented some kind of storefront functionality now. And again, I haven't used this myself, but it might certainly be possible to set up commissions this way. Lastly, technically, I do have one more I want to touch on after this, but as a main commission platform, I want to mention Artistry. No, this isn't another sponsored video by them. I just genuinely enjoy using Artistry so much and love what they're trying to do. So Artistry is a great payment option because they have both Stripe and PayPal support, and with this platform, you can link your profile where you'll be able to show clients all your detailed commission info, as well as info on how to contact you, what your waitlist looks like if applicable, and you'll be able to chat with them and send them whips directly on the site, so you don't have to bounce between social medias and emails and all this other stuff. Everything from the initial contact to all of the works in progress, everything is done directly through Artistry. It also has full customer and artist protection on both your and the client side, so if you're an artist or a client wary of scams, Artistry is a great place to go, and they also send a portion of their proceeds to planting trees, hence the name Artistry. So now the actual last option that I want to mention is Etsy or Shopify or any other online store platform, potentially Ko-fi as well, but again, I'm not sure how their e-commerce portion of their site works, so for Ko-fi in particular, take this as a grain of salt. I would not actually recommend using Etsy or anything similar as a platform for commissions, and my main reasoning for this is because it's a bit difficult to be accurately paid for your work without painstakingly labeling things like variants for all of the different things that could potentially alter the price of a commission. So take my commissions for example. A normal fully rendered half body for me is currently $65. That's going to change soon, but I will announce that later. But for now, they're currently $65 for one person. Well, let's say that this commissioner would like an illustration with 3 people. I charge 50% per additional character. So how would I label that on Etsy? I can add a variation, sure, but then I'd have to think of every possible variation. So I'd have the listing for my main 3 tiers, right? So I think I have 4. So I have icon, bust, half body, and full body. So then I would have those, but then I would have to have variations for 3 people, for 7 people, 2 people, 9 people, 20 people. That's annoying. annoying and would be way too much for someone to digest. Not only that, but I charge extra for things like really detailed clothing or tattoos, for example, armor or intricate accessories or patterns, or again, tattoos, because they're basically drawings within drawings, because they're things that are recognizable about a person or a character that I can't exclude, but it also makes the commission take longer and more time needs to be reflected accurately in my price. So let's say I add a variation for armor. Well, what if all three of those characters have armor? Then I'd have to make variations for armor and how many of the characters are wearing armor. It's way too much for you to have to think about and for the client to have to sort through and absorb. It would be so much easier to just have someone come to you and tell you what they need done so that they can, or so that you can calculate accordingly. For example, imagine someone having to spend 40 minutes on my Etsy trying to figure out how much this commission is going to cost them and eventually giving up because it's too complicated for them to figure out, and the price not being even accurate in the first place because they're not sure if what they have in mind actually pertains to any of those variations, versus them just coming to me and finding out, yep, your 3-person commission has armor and is altogether going to be around 112 to 130, or actually, yes, you have 3 people, but I don't actually think that that armor is detailed enough for it to take too much longer, meaning I don't need to charge you for it, so it's actually going to be around 96. And then I've got all of the details of the commission, the payment type sorted, and everything planned in a fraction of the time that it would have taken for someone to go through a listing. And I would know that the price is accurate. Imagine you go through all the effort to sort out your listings with all of the variants, and someone actually takes time to place an order. You get to that order and they haven't selected any of the variations for detailed elements, but you can see that their characters are super complex and detailed for you, but they didn't think so. So now you've got to cancel their order and have them go through the order process again, but now you have to walk them through what variations they're going to have to order, and that's a hassle for both of you. On top of that, if they want changes, it's going to make it even more complicated, but we'll touch on that in a bit. Overall, I would not at all recommend an online marketplace as a way to list commissions if you're not doing them at a fixed price, unless it's something like your direct store. Either way, I wouldn't recommend it because you never know how a design is going to alter your time. The only thing that I would suggest doing so, or the only time I would suggest doing so, is if someone contacts you directly through Etsy, for example, requesting a commission. If they do, you can chat to them through that messenger there and then make a custom listing after speaking with them and getting all of the details. This way, the listing pertains only to that one customer and you're able to price it accordingly without all of the variation hassle. Keep in mind though, Etsy does include listing fees for regular and custom orders alongside a dozen other fees. So keep that in mind. Tip number 3 is, now that you have your pricing and your payment methods, how should you accept payment? It's been long up for debate whether you should receive partial payment, such as 50% upfront, or the amount full upfront exclusively. And I used to be someone that said 100%, without a doubt, always accept the full amount upfront. But since then, I've kind of changed my stance. So let me explain why. For me personally, I do my commissions in 3 stages, unless it's a sketch commission, and send them to the commissioner as I'm working on them so that they're able to tell me if they need any changes, whether they're slight or major. So I can either take the full amount up front and send them every stage with no issue, or I can split their payment into thirds or 1/2 if it's a sketch commission. But when it comes to partial payment, always take that first portion before starting each stage. For example, let's say someone's again interested in one of my half bodies. Well, a half body is $65 and they don't have $65 right now, but they really like my art and want to get their hands on it. Well, then I would split the costs into thirds, with the first payment being $22. After I get that $22 is when I would begin working on the sketch, and then I'd send it to the client for approval. And then once they approve that, I would get the next $22, then do the line art, and so on. I will not even think about touching that piece of line art until they're ready to do another payment. We do not do unpaid work in this household, and neither should you. If you take partial payments, never settle for sending them even a third of that illustration before you're paid, even watermarked, nothing, because people out here will take that art and run, watermarked or not. So in a way, it's partial payment, but you're also getting paid for the work that you're currently doing fully upfront, which I think is an awesome way to do commissions because it makes them more affordable and accessible for people who appreciate art, and it also just makes things easier on you as the artist. So moving on to tip number 4, how do you set boundaries when it comes to your work, and what boundaries should you even have in mind? So some important boundaries to have are things that you're not comfortable drawing, whether that's from a technical skill standpoint like mechs or furries, or from just a generally uncomfy standpoint like NSFW. It's important that you list somewhere things that you 100% without a doubt will not draw, things that you are okay with drawing but that might come with fees, and things that you're just generally always okay with drawing. Another important boundary, as I've now brought up many times in this video, is the types and the amounts of revisions that you'll accept from a client. Some clients might not want you to change anything, some might want you to make small alterations to the expressions or the hands or the outfits, and some might want major revisions like an entirely new pose. There are also others that might ask for so many small revisions that might not feel like much at the time, but will eventually add up. For example, commissions normally take me personally 1 to 3 hours, but I have a canvas that's sitting on 9 hours and counting because they kept asking for so many revisions that it just kept adding and adding and adding to the canvas, or the time spent on the canvas. It's also important to take note of how many revisions you're comfortable doing, or whether or not certain types of revisions will take up a lot of your time. For example, the second commission that I was talking about, how they asked for free sketches and then kept asking for major revisions after I finished the line art. If I were going into that commission now, I would have absolutely been firm in charging them for the initial sketches, because that is time and effort I put into something that I ultimately didn't and wouldn't have been able to use for the commission. Even if they had decided to stay aged up, those sketches still weren't applicable to the pose, and I did more than one age range, so ultimately there still would have been multiple sketches left unused. So let's talk about how I would have handled that commission differently now that I have more experience. I probably would have suggested that we start off doing a simple sketch with a basic pose and mid-range in age. That way they would be able to gauge whether they wanted to be younger or older and what theme they wanted to go with. I also would have been paid first. That way I would have only had to add or remove aging effects rather than creating 3 entirely separate sketches, and those would also end up being minor alterations I wouldn't have had to charge for, but agreeing to those free sketches resulted in me doing extra work that I absolutely would have charged for otherwise. Additionally, had we still been in the sketch phase when they decided they didn't like the pose, I likely wouldn't have charged them for that either, because in the sketch phase everything is rough and I'm able to make changes like that quickly without taking up much time. However, since they'd asked me to alter the pose and features after fully doing the line art, I would have charged, because I just spent at least a good 1 to 2 hours lining something that they ultimately aren't going to use, and they basically have a free finished piece of art that they can color on their own time. Not only that, but I have to then go in and spend another 1 to 2 hours sketching and lining a brand new pose, so time spent on that commission is nearly double, because line art takes me the longest and I definitely deserve to be paid for that hard work. Another thing to keep in mind, things like if you do the line art and then they're like, oh, can you move the arm? That would also be a minor alteration because it's one small thing. But if they want you to entirely redo like a completely different reference photo, completely different pose, make sure that's something that you consider charging for, because that's something that's going to take you a very long time most likely, unless you do line art fast. If you do line art fast, good for you. Go you. So yeah, just keep in mind what things you are and aren't comfortable drawing and how many changes you're willing to make before charging additional fees. And once again, keep in mind how those alterations are going to affect you as far as time goes. That's another reason why I mentioned Etsy was not the best, because if they'd paid me for that commission through Etsy and then asked for major revisions, I'd have to open a second custom listing just to charge for revisions and get hit with fees again, which sucks and is not good or fun at all. And finally, number 5, the last tip that I have for you guys. This one is kind of simple, and that's to just enjoy yourself. Please do not take on more work than you can handle. I know it can be thrilling to take on a ton of commissions at once because the starving artist trope is so pronounced that it can be so exciting to see the numbers rise when you're getting paid to make art. But if you bite off more than you can chew, you are going to get burnout. If you don't want to take slots because you don't want to give off the impressions that your commissions aren't opened when they are, then consider having a wider turnaround time. For example, my turnaround time is usually 3 to 9 days because I know technically with a smaller commission margin, I'm able to get each commission done in 3 days. But sometimes life happens and things come up, and that can make commissions take longer. It's also kind of important to let your client know if something comes up. You don't have to give major details or anything, but it can just be good to let your clients know if you're delayed because that lets them know what's going on and makes it so that you don't have to stress out about not having updated anyone. Also, taking on a ton of commissions at once can make it harder for you to do personal work. Me suddenly having an influx of regular commissions last year without regular experience for how to handle it is what led to me having to put things aside like Patreon, YouTube, and my personal illustration work. I don't have to do that now because I understand the amount of time commissions take me, and I charge accurately so I don't have to take on more than what I can handle, and I know how to pace myself and communicate with clients so I'm not anxious and overwhelmed anytime I have to do something that isn't working solely on commissions when I know I have whips that I need to have taken care of. For example, for Valentine's Day, I did not follow my own advice. I took so many commissions on, even though I actually did have slots. They just filled up in such a way that I had an influx at the beginning and then kind of like a smaller amount, and then as I got caught up, I had a wave of them come in again. And so I was doing so many commissions at once that I was having to fully plan out on my calendar how to get through them all, which is not something that I normally have to do, and I was feeling super anxious and stressed out the entire time because I also had a super short deadline. I should have announced that way sooner in January, so I would have had, I would have been able to expect, things coming in. Anyways, don't bite off more than you can chew. Take on a couple at once, close your commissions, open them back up again, or if you want to have them open 24/7, just make sure your turnaround time accurately reflects that. If you're somebody like me and I say my turnaround time is 3 to 9, but then somebody hits me with a commission, I try to let them know like, hey, I'm backed up at the moment. Yes, you can totally grab a commission now, but you probably aren't going to see it being started until this date, and I'm probably not going to have it finished until this date. So yeah. Keep everybody updated. Try to stay calm. I promise you can handle it. So those are all of my commission tips and tricks. I hope these were somewhat helpful. If you guys have any other questions about commissions, please ask them down below and I will do a follow-up video answering them. I am by no means a complete commission expert, but I have been doing them for over a year now, so I'm kind of got my groove on. So if you have any questions, absolutely feel free to ask me. Like I said, if you like this piece and you're interested in my commissions, my artistry page and any socials will be linked down below so you can get all of those details there. And lastly, Draculaura Prints are out. If you're still watching this video, those are available on my Etsy, so you can go and grab one of those now. I have not made stickers of her yet because I only got requests for prints, but if you want to see her as a sticker as well, I'll do my best. It'd be kind of weird cropping, but I would be happy to figure it out if that's something you guys want to see. Anyways, I love you guys so much, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Bye.